Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on International Human Rights Day. Welcome to the Transforming Tech and Tackling Taboos, Addressing Violence in a Digital World dialogue, jointly hosted by the International Planned Parenthood Federation, East, Southeast Asia and Oceania Region, IPPF ESEAOR, and Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, ASAP. This dialogue is part of our 16 Days of Activism campaign to end gender-based violence and accelerate action in gender equality. During this dialogue, we will be discussing topics related to online and offline violence and abuse that may be disturbing, even traumatizing to many of us. If you feel the need to step away from this dialogue, either for a short time or for the rest of the session, we strongly suggest that you use your discretion to do so and get the support you need. We will be sharing a link in the chat box of helplines across Asia and the Pacific and encourage anyone who would like support to seek it. Now for some housekeeping. For your questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and indicate if you are directing a question to a particular panelist. We will be monitoring the Q&A box, and we will have time for questions and answers from the audience after the second panel. But please note that we may not be able to answer all the questions within the given time. We also have simultaneous interpretation in Bahasa Indonesia and sign language, and this session is being recorded. The recording of this event will be made available later online if you wish to access this dialogue. To begin, I would like to warmly welcome Tomoko Fukuda, Regional Director of the International Planned Parenthood Federation, East, Southeast Asia and Oceania Region, to give the opening remarks.
Thank you, Natasha, for the introduction, and greetings and welcome all of you to this webinar that we're hosting on such an important day for all of us. My name is Tomoko. As introduced, I'm the Regional Director for IPPF in this region, the East and Southeast Asia and Oceania region. And it's a great pleasure to bring this webinar to all of you and to be part of this conversation. Firstly, I want to acknowledge all the survivors attending this dialogue, discussing and openly discussing and hearing about online abuse, and something that might bring back memories or traumatize you is extremely difficult. And we stand in solidarity with you. We are grateful for your courage and leadership and activism and your participation in the webinar today. So we at IPPF ESEAOR and the Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, we work to advance sexual and reproductive health rights of women, girls, and non-binary persons in Asia Pacific, as we are constantly battling forces opposed to equal rights and equal access to healthcare online and offline. We often ask ourselves, how can women, girls, and non-binary people collectively create a safe space online, free from censorship and surveillance? How can we make that a reality? So the question is even more critical today as we are spending more and more time online to the lockdowns, movement restrictions. I think in the past year and 2 years, this is the same across the world. So this conversation today is ever more critical. And as part of the 16 Days of Activism campaign this year, this dialogue will explore conversations around the impact of violence against women, girls, and non-binary persons, both online and offline, but especially around technology and online digital spaces, and pioneering initiatives to prevent violence and or support survivors of violence. So we're happy to bring together all of you advocates, activists, change makers of SRHR across Asia Pacific to initiate this local and regional conversation on online and offline violence. How can we strengthen existing movements and collaborations to address gender-based violence, and especially the technology-assisted violence against women and girls in our region? I think we will all agree that the internet is double-edged. It's an important space to gain knowledge, to express ourselves, an opportunity to share, connect, but it's also becoming increasingly becoming a platform for abusement and harassment. especially targeting women, young women, girls, and non-binary persons. There is also an increased online surveillance and censorship to immediate and silence SRHR advocates and activists and hinder access to accurate information and support, especially when they find keywords such as talking about safe abortion or even talking about the rights of LGBTQI community. Those conversations can be censored. So we realize that that is a reality of what is happening in our world today. So we are committed, and I think all of you here today are also committed to help create a world free of gender-based violence, and that everyone can participate fully and safely in society, in our work. And yes, the technology-based solutions have been game-changing, but still we see the challenges that are there. So while recognizing that technology and internet are public good, we find that these platforms often replicate patriarchal imperialist systems and structures that perpetuate inequality, violence, and rob us of our bodily autonomy. So IPPF, ESEAOR, and ASAP designed this dialogue because there are a few conversations on this topic that we have seen emerging in this last year or so. And this dialogue will look at see how ideally we can, how technology can be value neutral and perpetuate an ecosystem of violence. So during this session, we will hear from many grassroots SRH advocates, providers, feminists, and on how they are navigating their interventions through this digital space. What are the prevention measures that we can take to care, and what are the support that is needed? So I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I hope there will be a very valuable and rich discussion following. And please feel free to share your comments, your thoughts, your questions. Let us all work together to make sure that we create safe spaces for women, girls, and non-binary persons across the countries, across the regions, in their communities, in the streets, and definitely online and as well. So thank you very much, and looking forward to this exciting webinar. Welcome once again, and I pass back to Natasha.
Thank you, Tomoko, for those powerful words and setting the tone for this dialogue. I will now pass it over to Nandini Mazumdar of the Asia Safe Abortion Partnership to provide an overview of the impact of the information age on sexual and reproductive rights advocacy and activism. Over to you, Nandini.
Thank you, Natasha. And those were some really important comments that Tomoko made. I will start with something that I've prepared to show to the participants today. So like Tomoko said, that the internet is a double-edged sword. So I'll start from that line of yours, Tomoko, and that I think is what I wanted to also expand on more. So tech in itself is not evil. Tech is, it totally depends on who is using it, how and why. And as SRHR advocates, as people, feminist human rights defenders, it is important for us to engage with tech more and more. We want to talk about autonomy and agency, and we cannot no longer not talk about how autonomy agency plays out even in the realm of tech. So this webinar was about tech and taboos. And so I thought, maybe why not connect the dots? What is the relationship between tech and taboos? So taboos exist in the real world. There are taboos that are very much in our culture, in our religion, in our everyday practices, in our language, in our pop culture and everything else. And there is a way that they also play out in the tech realm. So the people who have developed the tech, people who use the tech are the same people who also belong to that culture where taboos that fuel gender-based violence is deep-rooted. So here's my first image, which I wanted to share with all of you, to say that how these gendered norms often play out to a disadvantage of, for disadvantaging women, queer and trans people. How domestic chores are often, or the burden of, or the responsibility of domestic chores are disproportionately on women. And therefore, a lot of the achievements, career paths, goals just get diluted or never, never accessible for many women. Like in India, currently, we have seen that the ratio of women at employable jobs has actually reduced in the past few years. And so this is again so very culturally accepted and celebrated, a woman's role in the domestic sphere, a woman as an altruistic being, that this is of course what we see rampantly all around us. And then again, the culture of toxic masculinity. So how we raise our boys, we raise them to not be emotional, boys don't cry. We raise them to suppress their emotions. And of course, they grow up to be men who think that being detached, being violent is masculine. So the concept of the toxic masculinity is that masculinity that has also been enabled by culture and fuels violence against women or gender-based violence. And of course, this the last images of a man and woman, and you see different words splashed on them. But these words are what determine how, for the same behavior, men, cis hetero men are judged in a very different way than queer, trans, or women. So it's very important to sort of keep the taboos in mind, which fuels gender-based violence, as we move forward and talk a little bit more. And later on, I'll tell you how we connect the two. So again, this is the culture of victim blaming. So whenever there is an assault that happens, the first questions that society, state, law, all the mechanisms that are there will ask, why did you go out at that time? What were you drinking? What were you wearing? And also, if you see the way newspapers report these incidents, newspapers often report it in a way that she was raped, and not that these two people committed a crime and raped this person. So it's again the way misogyny, sexism, and gendered norms play out, unjust gendered norms, that puts women, queer, and trans people at a disadvantage. This is an example, like the recent National Family Health Survey that was conducted in India was actually showed that a large proportion of women who were interviewed agreed that it's okay for the partner to hit on the wife or the woman. So that's how internalized misogyny and sexism is, and that's how violent our culture is. And gender-based violence is almost a norm in many of our cultures. So this is an image from, this is a very contrasting image, but it's very interesting. This image, and one end is a police who's measuring the length of the swimsuit, because at one point the swimsuit was considered, if it was longer, it was considered, if it was short, like the length of the swimsuit determined whether you were chaste or not. So you had to wear long swimsuits to be considered moral and a good woman. However, in recent times, we've seen in Europe the whole controversies around burkini and this whole policing of the female body. So whether you want to cover up or you don't, it's never your choice. If you're a woman, if you're a queer or a trans person, the patriarchy determines how much you have to cover up, and what are the punitive measures that will be taken against you if you don't follow those rules of patriarchy. So this is, I think, a very interesting image of how much controlled and policed the female body is, from the bikini to the burkini. The other censoring of female bodies that is happening is on the tech, of course, in the tech realm of tech. We see that the female nipple is banned, and it's not something that tech platforms will allow you to show because of, again, concerns around modesty, morality, and all of that. Of course, the male nipple is not banned, and this creates so much of a problem that not only female expressions are curbed, but even important messages like breast self-exams and all of these messages around breast cancers and all are constantly being censored on television and on social media. So this is again something which is very, very important for us to keep in mind, how the taboos that we see in the offline world flows into the tech world as well. again, this is a similar, like a picture from a poet Rupi Kaur posted with the menstrual blood. And the menstruation itself, we know, is how stigmatized it is. And no different, that's no different on the tech realm as well. This picture was very, very controversial. She was trolled for it. And, so we see the same taboos that exist offline play out online as well. And this is a poster from Malaysia during the last year's, the first year of the pandemic, when the government took out this poster with a message saying that women should wear makeup, women should not speak, women should speak like a cartoon character, like the Doraemon character to their husbands, and they should not nag, and just make sure that the husband is happy at home during the lockdown. So again, these perpetuate gendered norms, sexist norms, both offline and online, and the online and offline is constantly interacting and putting a lot of people, women, queer and trans people, at a very disadvantaged position. So, and why is it important for the SRHR advocates in Asia to talk about this? Because in Asia, we have Asia has half of the world's internet users. Just for 3 countries that has the largest numbers of both mobile phone and internet users are in Asia: China, India, and Indonesia. So it is, of course, very, very important for us to engage with this issue. And as again, Tomoko mentioned about tech being a double-edged sword, completely, tech has also enabled us to share information, to strengthen solidarities, and feminist voices across the world have come together. Movements have become global, of course, with varying degrees of success, but at least the conversations have started. So we have the Me Too movement in Bangladesh, we have the Slut Walk from Hong Kong, and some of these conversations are happening everywhere. And as I said, with, of course, varying degrees of success, but the conversations are happening. So that's amazing. However, we have to understand the larger context of tech. Tech in its larger context works through big pharma, the big companies, the tech companies, and governments. Governments across the world, and particularly in Asia, is moving towards an authoritarian style of governance. What it is doing is that internet freedom in Asia is actually shrinking. There has been a lot more increase in surveillance mechanisms like facial recognition technologies and other forms of surveillance using biometrics. And of course, there are restrictive laws which curtail your expression and freedom of expression online. A lot of the comments, posts, even cartoons that people have posted online has been used against them, and governments have used social media as a weapon against people as well. So internet freedom in Asia is something which is a matter of concern, with many countries moving towards less and less freedom. Again, as I said, so connected to it is censorship and internet shutdowns. We know that a lot of the things that we want to say, we cannot say. A lot of the times we have seen people getting arrested for posts they've made, and which creates an atmosphere of fear. So anyone who has a dissenting opinion or is challenging the status quo is at risk. And therefore, there's a general environment of fear and even self-censorship. Of course, there's also the problem of internet shutdown. So there's the whole infrastructure of the internet right now is controlled by the capitalist forces and your governments. So what it does is that if they fear that there will be a mass protest or a mass movement around something that will be dissenting and that will challenge the status quo, they just shut the infrastructure for the people. And interestingly, this is what I found a report from last year, which said that 70% of world's internet shutdowns actually happened here in India. So it's very interesting that, how so the one connecting force that we have today in the world is the internet, can be pulled out from us at any moment. So tech and taboos, of course, reproduce offline gender inequalities online as well. We see that the greater number of users of internet and mobile actually both are men, which means that we are seeing the same inequalities being are similar gender inequalities are reproduced online. So online trolling against women have really become a thing, which has real life consequences. So this is a picture of Kandil Baloch, who was the social media star from Pakistan, and she used the internet to express herself, express her sexuality. It was considered taboo and seen as something stigmatized, and that she was bringing dishonor to the family, because of course honor lives in a woman's body, and her own brother killed her. And so what you do online has real life repercussions. Similarly, this is of course a journalist, Maria Ressa from Philippines, and she has been under tremendous attack and trolling. And there are studies that are showing women journalists who have dissenting opinions and challenge the status quo are at greater risks of trolling, including death threats. So taboos and SRHR. So again, how it is very, very important for us to talk about these issues, because we face constant trolling, shadow bans. A lot of our posts are not allowed online, or they do not have the reach. Algorithms work against us. The AI is created also to curtail our voices and our reach. And of course, how online platforms are used to surveil, monitor, track, and arrest people who are working in the field of SRHR and safe abortion rights. So this is just two pictures from just very, very recent, from 5 people arrested for offering abortion services online in Philippines. And again, this is from 5 people who were arrested for running an online abortion clinic in Indonesia. So, and this is very rampant. So we are constantly, feminist voices are being curtailed online, with offline repercussions as well. So the way forward. So I just wanted us to reiterate, and and I know the panels will take this up more, but we've already dived deep into the realm of technology. Technology and online spaces are very, they have permeated all aspects of our lives and closely interlinked with one another. So we now live both in the offline and the online worlds, and we must engage and explore this. We have to also understand the nuances of technology, who owns it. So the big tech companies, what are the relationship between the big tech companies and the governments? So how do they collude? Are they in favor of human rights or not? Are they open to our voices or not? So some of these things that we have to grapple with. We have to engage with these tech companies also and see, what their stands are on things. Where do they stand? We have to also look at the taboos, the social taboos that already exist in our culture, and how they play out in the tech realm. We have to also see, and ultimately we have to look at accountability. And in accountability, when I say that, I say in all 3 aspects: the companies, the governments, and also us as individuals, because a lot of the trolls are people like us. So we have to, like, when we do this work, we have to continue doing this work. We continue to spread awareness, because who knows that we're probably going to change the mind of one person and prevent one person from becoming a troll and attacking our work and us. So there is just no other option but for us to engage. But I think this is a very exciting proposition, that we need to engage with tech more. And with that, I close my presentation. I would then just hand it over to Natasha now, and request her to take on the panel, and the panel will be exploring more of some these issues that we just presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini, for setting the scene on how tech and taboo affect our personal and professional lives as advocates and activists, which gives us a great starting point to segue into this first panel. Good day, everyone. My name is Natasha. I am the Senior Officer for Advocacy and External Relations at IPPF ESEAOR, and I'll be moderating the first panel. We all understand that the internet is a great space to learn, interact, and express ourselves, and many of our panelists have used the space to amplify their work and reach women and girls with information and sexual and reproductive health services. However, we cannot dismiss that while it provides opportunities, digital spaces are also forms of oppression that threatens progress for sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality. We will briefly unpack these issues and concepts through the panel discussion. And on this panel, we have Pushpa Joshi, the co-founder of Yoshan in Nepal. And if I can get support to please spotlight Pushpa and keep her on spotlight. Thank you. And also on the panel is Noval Auliadi from Jakarta Feminist. And thank you. Chris Ann from the Family Planning Organization of the Philippines, and Amalia from Women on Web. I'll just continue while support helps out to spotlight Amalia. Thank you. So I will kickstart this panel by asking each of the amazing panelists here to briefly introduce yourself and how you use the digital space in your work. We will start with Pushpa, followed by Noval, then Chris Ann, and then Amalia. Thank you.
Tasha. Hello, everyone. My name is Puspa Joshi, and I'm from Nepal. And I have been working in the sector of sexual and reproductive health rights, safe abortion rights, and related issues for more than 5 years in Nepal. And I am currently involved with YOSHAN. The full form is Youth-Led Sexual and Reproductive Health Rights Advocacy Nepal. I'm involved with this organization as a co-founder. And we are also the country network advocacy network of ESEAOR Safe Abortion Partnership. And we all youth champions are voluntarily contributing in this organization for the SRHR advocacy with primary focus on safe abortion rights in Nepal. And we are more than 100 youth champions in Nepal who are trained young individuals. So talking about the online advocacy through YOSHAN, we have been actively doing advocacy on both physical as well as online. But after COVID, our work has been mostly limited to online advocacy. Because most of the young people are online and it's not feasible right now to do physical workshops at the moment. And we have been doing multiple programs in online spaces. For example, we have been conducting webinar and online workshops on SRHR, safe abortion rights issues and related issues. And we also do social media campaigns in different days, for example, International Safe Abortion Day or International Youth Day or in related days. And we also disseminate informative products such as infographics, videos, posters, memes, and so on in the social media so that we can reach out to more people, especially young people. And we have also started our video podcast, which we upload on YouTube and also share on social media. And we also provide information and address queries of people on SRHR and safe abortion through our social media, for example, on Messenger and Instagram. So since we post a lots of contents on safe abortion rights, many young people message us with their questions related to abortion, for example, where they can get abortion in a particular district, or they also ask if it is safer for them to have abortion in certain trimester. We get questions like that, and we also address their questions on platforms like Messenger and Instagram. And we also have a chat group where we all youth champions share opportunities with each other and we support each other. And we also collaborate with other organizations on online spaces for activism. For example, we take part in Tweetathon, and then we also collaborate in video podcast, and we also collaborate in webinars. So in this way, we have been doing a lot of activism on online spaces right now. And so far, we have been getting a lot of feedback, especially positive feedbacks from our stakeholders, our partners, collaborators. And we are also getting a lot of direct messages from young people with their questions. So I think we have been successfully mobilizing with online spaces right now. Thank you so much, Natasha. So this is how we have been engaging online through YOSHAN.
Thank you, Pushpa, and I'll pass it to Noval to introduce himself. Thank you.
Hi, Natasha. Hi, everyone. Hi, so my name is Noval Aliadi. I am a program manager in Jakarta Feminist. We are an intersectional feminist organization, and we coordinate Women's March Jakarta and the Women's March in 20 cities all across Indonesia. We are starting out in digital space actually as a Facebook group in 2014, but we are established as an organization in 2019. We are currently initiating charilayanan.com, website directory for SGBV service providers. So it's a cyber-based response for SGBV in Indonesia. We have more than 100 service providers currently all across Indonesia based on people's needs and location. And we do this because we understand that we currently have more than 100 million internet user in Indonesia. So it's a very massive, and to do this, I think it's a very strategic intervention. And beside the carilayanan.com that you could access with the shadow domain, actually belipotbunga.com or buy a flower face, because we understand that sometimes people are living with their perpetrators and we want them to be safe while accessing the help through our website as well. We also have a bot actually. So we utilize AI on our Twitter and Facebook. So we have this thing called public reply bot, where the AI is actually automatically 24 hours a day to find people who needs help by their tweets and refer them to the nearest service providers. So we analyze some keywords that people use when they ask for help in Twitter especially. And every time people tweet with those keywords, we will reply to them in seconds. So it's really helpful for the service providers who don't have enough human resources to reply all of these tweets. And so we're trying to revolutionize the response system by actively looking for people that needs help instead of just waiting for people to ask for help to us. And we are currently partnering with a lot of initiatives as well, as such as dating apps. We are in the first stage to partner with Tinder and OkCupid to incorporate Cari Layanan into their application. So I think it's an example of good practice that we can do in internet, and we hope to reclaim the space and use the internet with feminist value to be hopefully make an internet as a feminist space which is inclusive and space for all of us, the marginalized communities, and to prove that we can actually utilize it as well to combat violence, especially sexual and gender-based violence in the world. So that's that. Thank you so much, Natasha, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast.
Thank you, Noval, for introducing yourself and the work that you do. We'll move on to Chris Ann now.
Hi, everyone. So good afternoon again. So I am Francisca Guillermo. I am an active youth volunteer of FOP Philippines since 2013, and I am also a trained peer educator and community-based screening motivator. So I've been working with the FOP and all of the youth-centered and youth-initiated community activities, outreach programs, and projects for the advocacy of sexual and reproductive health, and as well as for sexual and gender-based violence. So FPOP is a nonprofit and a non-government organization which aims to champion the sexual and reproductive health of every Filipinos, especially the youth and the adolescents. And it also aims to reach more people in championing also in prevention and response to the sexual and gender-based violence. So recently we have been working with the FPOP have been working, and also as the youth who initiated in the promotions, in educational awareness, and as well as in response to the prevention of sexual and gender-based violence. So the internet actually has been a great use, or is a great tool in our work as a youth advocate of SRH and SGBV, especially in this time of pandemic. So it served as the following four C's. So we have the first one, the communication. So it helped us for communication, for reaching more people in delivering services and information that the awareness and sexual and gender-based violence. Through this, we have conducted online webinars and also the launching of the Your Hotline or Your RH Hotline, which is a Facebook page, and also a Facebook Messenger chat hotline. And also, we used it during our Facebook Live episodes for increasing the educational awareness of the youth and adolescent Filipinos about sexual and gender-based violence, for informing them that you have this safe space wherein you can ask for help, you can go for your concerns, and etc. The second C we have is the capacitating and empowerment. So it has been a bridge and a tool for training, orientations, and workshops with the use of digital platforms. So, and we have also the third C, the collaboration. So through collaboration, it strengthens and builds new partnerships with the private sectors, the public organizations, the local government units, and other local core groups. And the 4C is creating safe space for youth. So it is our main concern to make feel the youth that they have a safe space where they can run into, they can ask for help, and they can lobby their concerns. So the creation of your hotline or your RH hotline is a safe space for youth wherein they can lobby their concerns, ask for help, inquiries, and other necessary service and information that they need, which could tackle their sexual and reproductive health, their sexual and reproductive health rights, and especially the sexual and gender-based violence, and also the mental health. That would be all. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Chris-Anne, for introducing yourself and the Your Hotline that FPOP currently manages. And now we will hear from our final panelist, Amalia.
Hello, thank you, Natasha. Hi, everyone. I'm Amalia from Women on Web, and I have been involved in Purple Code Collective as well. Internet has been a core platform for the work of Women on Web for more than 16 years. Through internet, we build chain of solidarity to support women and pregnant person who needs to access safe abortion information and service. Internet connects them to the help desk who will answer their email every day in 18 languages, a medical team who will support them to answer medical questions and make prescriptions, and also to connect them to the pharmacies who will receive the prescriptions, and then the shipping company as well. So women and pregnant person can contact Women on Web through email so they can be provided with information to access safe abortion. Back to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Amalia. And now that we are familiar with our panelists, I will jump to the next question in the same sequence. So we'll start with Pushpa, followed by Noval, then Chris-Anne, and finally Amalia. The question for all four of our panelists is, in your line of work, what challenges have you faced using the internet or the digital spaces that you engage in? And how has this impacted the people who access your services? Pushpa, to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Natasha, for the question. So Yoshan, in Yoshan, the primary issue which we work on is safe abortion, and abortion is legalized in Nepal under circumstances. So it's comparatively very easy for us to talk on issues like abortion in online spaces. But if we talk about sex selection or third trimester abortion, then yeah, we receive backlashes and rude comments, from public in our posts. So these are some of the challenges when we specifically talk about abortion beyond the legal circumstances in our country. And we also use chat groups on WhatsApp, Messenger, and the young audiences who follow our social media, they also send us questions about abortion on Messenger, and we have been addressing their questions in these platforms so far. So I always feel like we can have a better and safer and secure platforms for such talks. For example, Signal or Telegram, but the challenge is that Signal and Telegram is not very much popular among public and young people. I always feel like we should have alternative, safer spaces to talk about these sensitive issues. And another challenge we have faced so far is, recently we had collaborated with other movements. For example, recently we did a podcast series on sex workers movement. But since sex work has been criminalized in Nepal, we cannot openly discuss about sex work in public spaces, even in the online spaces. So we had to be very much tricky and creative while talking about sex work. So one of the interesting thing I would like to share is, in the title of the podcast, instead of using the word sex work, we use the phrase women who have been marginalized by their profession. So in this way, we rephrase the sentences in such a way that we do not catch unwanted attention from the authorities, and which might be very much disadvantaging for our movement. So this is how we have been facing challenges, and we have been addressing. So talking about how this has impacted the people who access our services, that if we talk about third trimester abortion or abortion after the sex determination, we get hate speeches online. So our conversation on these issues have been comparatively limited, but we just try to we try to involve this conversation in webinars and sometimes in the public posts as well. And yeah, so far we have been facing challenges, but we also have a support system, and we also have strategies to tackle these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Pushpa. I think it's interesting that you've creatively framed the issue around sex work so that it's safer, so you can create a safer space to discuss about it. Thank you. We'll now move to Noval.
Okay, thank you, Natasha and Puspa. Challenges, where do I start? I think to work in digital spaces is just very different than offline space, especially regarding our social media bot. I think the biggest challenge is the fact that we are actually not an engineer. Well, I do study computer engineer for a little bit, but we do have a very limited capacity to develop the system ourselves. So we need help. We need to partner with a third party, which costs a lot of money. And you see, we are just starting out. We are just starting out as an organization in 2019. Thus, we have a very limited financial and human resources, sadly. And having an initiative on digital spaces, I think it needs a very specific skill that not a lot of people have. And currently, we have a technical problem with our bot, so it's not working now. And it's just very prone to technical malfunction. And sometimes we cannot do anything about it because it's very technical, and we need to rely on the third-party partner and the social media themselves. And I think doing this initiative on social media such as Twitter and Facebook means that we are actually very limited on what we can do by their terms and their conditions, and sometimes our design is just not compatible to their terms and their technology. But we understand that we cannot build our own system from scratch or our own application from the ground up because first, it's just not cheap, and I don't think it's accessible to a lot of people, because first people need to know the application first, and then they need to download it to their phone, and they need to have enough storage, and it's just very, very difficult and not accessible, I think. But when we talk about Twitter, when we talk about Facebook and WhatsApp and this huge, massive social media, they have a very huge user already, and we can utilize that. I think even though with their limitation, of course. But I think it is a good thing to keep in mind to do advocacy to the Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok and other social media institution to help make their space as an inclusive, safe space, and for us to be able to utilize their technology to combat hate, violence, and discrimination. And I think again, we are talking about a digital space right now, and we understand well, almost half of the population in Indonesia is using the internet, but half of them are not. And I think we need to understand that an offline intervention and offline response, offline outreach is still very much needed right now. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Noval. I think that's interesting that at the end, the control of the technology is also still in the hand of the technology companies, and it's difficult to be inclusive in or create spaces that are safe when we still need to rely on those companies to have, like you said, correct terms and conditions, correct, safe ways to access and to use the systems. And thank you for the last point around we can't just rely on technology. We can't just be online. It needs to be supported by offline, very similar to what Pushpa has said as well. Thank you. We'll move on to Chris Ann.
Okay, so actually the internet or the digital space, it has been a great help and a powerful tool in my field of work as a youth service provider. So because it helps us to connect with the Filipinos, to provide them the service and give them the information that they needed, especially when it talks about the sexual and gender-based violence. So during the pandemic, the internet has been a great help actually. So the people are staying at their homes. So the schools are shut down, so the students are staying also at their home, and we could think that the cases of sexual and gender-based violence is decreasing as we thought, but during the pandemic actually it is increasing, not because that we are staying at home, but because there is still a great risk on that factor, because even though you are staying at home, there is a risk of experiencing a sexual gender-based violence. So we, the FLP, utilize the Facebook page and the Facebook Messenger as the digital platform for online interventions, because most of the Filipinos are using it, and we have launched the Your RH hotline or Your Hotline, the Facebook page. So it is our response for offering a safe space for every Filipino. So they can send a chat message there, they can ask for their concerns, and they can also be scheduled for appointments for consultations, for counseling, or any other health services that they needed that we can deliver and give back. So during behind the successful hotline, we also encountered a lot of challenges. So the first challenge that we encounter is during introducing branding and promotions of the hotline. So the start off of the page, of the Your Hotline page, and introducing it to the people. So to make it well known to the Filipinos, especially to the youth and adolescents, and to have them and build a name and to promote it to the people, because you are going to make them feel that this is the safe space that you can run into and ask for help. It is where you can feel safe, and your identity will be confidential, and your privacy will be protected. So the promotion also was a challenge for us, but nevertheless, it was helped by the support of the FLP, by the CPMs and the other chapters. And also the second challenge was the access to the internet connection and the unstable internet connection. So we cannot reach the whole or the 100% numbers of Filipino youth and adolescents in giving the information and delivering the services of SRHR and SGBV, because not all of us are having or is granted with that access, because we also know that there are Filipinos that are habiting or living in a far-flung area, so their locality are not granted with the having the access of signal to the internet connection, but the cases of SGBV in that locality is present. So that is the challenge of how are we going to reach them. And also another thing is sometimes during the online events such as Facebook Live or launching online webinars and lectures, the internet connection also sometimes precedes an unstable connection. So then, and the third challenge is the risk in assessment. So the difficulty in building a rapport for the client to make them feel safe, the confidence in ensuring the confidentiality of their identity and information, and the concerns being shared. So the limitation also in assessing the client's feelings or emotions during the online intervention, because it is through only chat or online. So it is difficult to understand deeply or to feel the client's feelings, his or her expressions, behaviors, or thoughts. Because we also encounter that some clients may face mental health challenges and others are having suicidal thoughts or are in the urge of committing suicide. So it is really a great challenge for us on how to deal with clients who are experiencing mental health issues because of having that experience in sexual and gender-based violence. But as time goes by, we've learned how to create a better safe space, how to manage clients online, and also we have undergone trainings and empowerment workshops. So as a youth service provider, we are the ones involved in the first touch of clients in assessing them and providing them the service and information they need. And after which, if it is already beyond our control, we refer them to the service providers such as the nurses, the doctors, the psychometrician, the legal officers, which could cater them appropriately and give them the intervention that they need. And they will be scheduled for appointment if it calls for already for a face-to-face intervention. So that would be all.
Thank you, Chrisanne. I think you made some really good points around how you've utilized a widely used platform in the Philippines to create a space where people can reach out for support. And also the issue around the digital divide, access to devices, to stable internet connection is also a big concern, and it is a risk, especially for young girls. And thank you for sharing that your organization has linked both the online services to offline support and have developed and created pathways to ensure that people who need care or need support can receive it offline as well, and probably closer to their homes. Thank you, Chrisanne. And we will now hear from Amalia.
Thank you, Natasha. Many things have been mentioned by great speakers previously. So I just amplify what Nandini mentioned before. I would like to highlight about the censorship. So collaborate with ONI, a non-profit free software who documenting internet censorship around the world. In 2019, Women on Web is censored in a few countries such as Brazil, Iran, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and Turkey. And 1 year before, it was blocked by Indonesian government. And in early 2020, Spanish government blocked the access to Women on Web. And we filed a lawsuit at the Spanish National Court. So through internet, some governments violate the basic health rights. And the second, Women on Web social media accounts such as Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter have been banned a few times. Sometimes they even didn't let us know what had happened and our account just disappeared. Sometimes they inform us that it violates their community guidelines. We always make an appeal, and it's not as easy as it seems. we need to contact different people, waiting for some time, providing personal information before getting back the access of our own accounts. So besides that, when Google updates, the work of search engine also affect our visibility. Big tech companies need to pay attention on the basic rights to access information of sexual and reproductive health and using gender lens to update their platforms. So this has shown that how the power has been exercised by the government and also big tech companies, and we need to keep challenge them.
Thank you, Amalia, for speaking about the experience that Women on Web has had around censorship and how it negatively affects the services that you provide and the people that you're trying to reach. And now I'll ask the third and final question to this panelist. And just after hearing from all of you around the work that you do, because the question that I want to ask is, so what can we do perhaps as individuals to reclaim this space, the digital space, or even whether it's our responsibility to ensure that the internet is a safe space. So just something to think about, and the question is, what can we do together to reclaim the digital space? And we'll go through the same sequence. So Pushpa, please go ahead.
Thank you, Natasha, for the question. So in the presentation of Nandini, we clearly understood that online violence is not a new form of violence. It's just a manifestation of the same offline patriarchy or offline misogyny, sexism. So we also need to have a great strategy to tackle both offline as well as online patriarchy. And for this, first of all, we need to have a good support system in online spaces so that we can tackle the online threats collectively. For example, in Yoshan, what we do is when we see any sexist or anti-choice, anti-abortion posts in any of the public pages on Facebook, we share the link of the post in our chat group, and all of us go to the post and comment with facts and logics and tell them that the post is wrong and misleading. So in this way, we are using internet to share facts and reclaim our spaces. And one of the very important thing to do to reclaim internet in online spaces by women and other marginalized groups is that we need to support each other to reclaim online space. And we also need to make efforts collectively for reforms in the legislation for the safer internet online, so that, the same patriarchy, the same inequality is not reflected in the online spaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pushpa, for sharing how Yoshan is tackling this, but also highlighting the fact that the accountability and responsibility is not just on the individual, it's on the state and the technology companies as well. And now I'd like to hear from Noval. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. So I learn and do some social network analysis, or SMA, where I analyze the public conversation on Twitter specifically, and there is just a lot of things to learn from there. Like I see power every time people are speaking out and telling their followers, no matter how many, is it about the issue and the initiative that they are doing. And there is a reason, I think there is a reason why it is called World Wide Web, because it's just like spider web. It's just like spider web that we are spreading our words, and people in our circles help spreading our words as well by interacting with us. So please don't stop speaking out, don't stop tweeting, don't stop posting about this issue to your organization account and to your personal account, because I think your word is very, very powerful addition to the whole movement. And I see internet is just like a knife, and you could make a wonderful meal out of it. You could cut an overgrown grass, for example, but you could also hurt someone very bad. And just like a knife, we need to learn how to properly use it, because otherwise we could end up injuring ourselves. And we need to give ourselves and of course marginalized community the capacity to create something in internet, in digital spaces, because internet is a wonderful space where everything is possible. And if you can dream it, I think there is probably a technology for it. There is probably a way to do it. We just need to look for it and learn how to do it. So that's it. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Noval. I think it's a great point around keeping to speak out, tweet, and post when we see something, but also on the other hand, making sure that we're also safe online and are able to use these spaces safely. Thank you. And we'll hear from Chrisanne now.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Natasha. So what can we do together to reclaim the internet or digital space? So we can have first to strengthen the youth with the safe and positive use of internet or digital space. So we all know that internet is really useful and have its pros as long as you know how to use it positively and make a safe space out of it. So there are a lot of advantages in using the internet or digital platforms. It is like how you use it. If you use it positively, then the impact of it will be also positive to others and will be a domino effect to everyone. So we just have to strengthen the youth on the safe and positive use of internet. And the second also is to increase the educational awareness for the youth to be empowered in scrutinizing whether a certain digital space or platform would pose a risk of online violence and for them to protect themselves. So in increasing awareness or in educating them whether if that certain digital platform is a risk for them in experiencing a sexual and gender-based violence or online violence, then they could know how to protect themselves on also through online. And lastly, to publicize more on promotion of SRH and prevention of and response to SGBV. So we have to make it publicized to increase publication about SGBV because here in the Philippines or the Filipinos here, some of them also still don't know totally what SGBV is. So they sometimes have this thought that if they have experienced something, they don't know that it is already a sexual violence, that they could do something, that they have to protect themselves. And on the other hand, also, we needed to publicize because they could know also where to go, where to run, who to call for help, because they could feel that they are also alone. But let us make them feel that they are not alone. We are here. We are here offering our hand and offering them a safe space, because if the home is not a safe space, then we could offer them a safe space. That would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrisanne. I think you raised an interesting point about how new users are accessing the internet and digital spaces, and how can they have the skills to, how do we promote skills or promote the use promote new users to use the internet safely, or to educate them on how to use it safely from an individual perspective, and knowing that youth are the largest group of people using the internet. How are they educated when they come in? How do they access information safely? And the other many points that you raised. So thank you, Chris. And now we'll hear from Amalia. Go ahead, Amalia.
So I would like to thank IPPF and ESEAOR who initiate this webinar that show the intersection between HR, and technology. This is really important space and need to do it regularly. We need to strengthen our collaboration or collective work amongst HR activists and also digital rights activist group. We can start by discussing about the feminist principle of the internet together. We can look back at 17 principles in 5 clusters that have been started in 2014 and contextualize with our work in SRHR to know the principles and to respect that on our daily life. For instance, being anonymous is one of the rights, and we can respect on that as well. So I think we really need to do together to advocate this issue We also can challenge the big tech company and also the government just to make sure that they are not violating our rights. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Amalia, for that really great point and a really great way of concluding this panel around further pursuing the interrelationship between sexual and reproductive rights and digital rights, and seeing the intersections and how we can pursue this better in a safer manner, making sure that the work that we do right now premises on, especially if you're providing reproductive healthcare, premises on do no harm, right? So how do we also bring that into digital spaces, and how do we ensure that from the work that we do and the spaces where we are engaged in? And once again, thank you to all my panelists for sharing your experiences of managing digital spaces and the impact that surveillance and censorship has had on your work in the short time that we've had today to have this conversation. Just to note that this is a snapshot of the issues around data security, around laws and regulations that do not support individuals or protect individuals from violence, whether offline or online. And the largest issue of all, that politics and ideology that are rooted in society, patriarchal norms, imperialism, are all replicated, and we can see it here around control and authority that states and technology companies have. And on the last note, what the panelists have all said is, how do we speak truth to power? How do we safely use the internet? How do we ensure that we have, and the people who are on the internet have the skills to ensure it is safe? And on that note, I will pass the mic to my co-moderator, Aisha Bashir from the Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, to moderate the second panel. Go ahead, Aisha.
Great. Thank you so much, Natasha. Am I audible to everyone? Is my audio? Okay, great. So yeah, I just want to start by saying thank you to all of the speakers and all of the panelists who shared the experience and the great work that they've been doing. I think what in the end, what matters is that we know that internet is something, or the online world or the online realm is something that is here to stay. And what Novel also said, that, just keep speaking out. I think that really resonated with me. And also, I want to just acknowledge here the work of, your hotline and Women on Web, because, as part of Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, so I manage the online communication and social media as well. So one important part of our work is also to sort of, people reaching out to us for abortion requests and like certain queries that they might have. And we need to, guide them to the correct resources or information or service providers. So, and in that sense, I think in the past 2 years, especially your hotline and Women on Web have played a revolutionary role, because I think that if they would, and to the point that not just that we don't ask the people who are reaching out to us to get in touch with them, but also the fact that we, ask them that were they able to get the help that they required, and they've responded with, always had a positive response. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to Chris and Amalia for the great work that they're doing. And yeah, as we move forward into this conversation, I think it's important to keep in mind that while technological advancements that we have seen have been quite promising and have offered a great platform for many to raise their voices, but we have realized even during our conversation right now that there does lie a huge gap, in fact, number of gaps. Various researchers, for example, across the world show that the marginalized folks, for example, women, like on a global average, have less understanding of the technology, have fewer digital skills. They may have less presence on online platforms, and are even less likely to own a mobile phone or other technological devices. In fact, in one of the research also mentioned that women on average are 26% less likely than men to have even a smartphone. So in such a scenario, while it's important to hold governments and platforms accountable, it is also important to demand the bridging of this particular gap between technology and its users, and the information that we have of the apps that we are using, the platforms that we are using. How aware are we of our rights when we are going online and sharing our opinion? And in this particular challenge, or this particular gap between the technology and its users and its creators, has been taken up by many women over the past few decades, who have been game changers in using technology to benefit and support those who are marginalized. And we have with one such person today with us, Ms. Kirti Jaikumar, Kirti is a feminist researcher and working in the areas of women, peace and security and transitional justice and feminist foreign policy. Kirti has also coded an app for survivors of gender-based violence called Sahas, which works as a web and mobile app and a Facebook chatbot to support survivors of gender-based violence across 196 countries and to assist bystander intervention. So, Kirti, thanks a lot for joining us and for taking out the time for the webinar. As we have learned from various speakers even until now that, and also from your extensive experience of being involved in this work of making tech more feminist and accessible to all, clearly there is a gap and certain dangers involved, even with being anonymously vocal online, especially questioning certain exploitative systems, and especially when you're questioning those in power. As we have been seeing recently in many South Asian countries and India in particular, there are a lot of people are being charged as anti-national elements for sharing their opinions online. So much of that number of cases are filed against them. They lose their jobs in their workplaces, and then it follows a loop just for something that that they were vocal online or sharing their opinion. So I think another important conversation that we need to have is are the options available for redressal to these people whose rights have been violated, and they can also be quite confusing and cumbersome for many, especially women. I mean, we do have cyber cells, but we have also seen that how efficient they are. So, considering all this, considering such a scenario, we wanted to ask, what is it that we need to understand about tech as users of tech, as ordinary individuals, or even as organizations? Because unless the oppressed and the marginalized, be it women, be it LGBTQI members, be it anti-caste or race activists, unless we use these tools proficiently to shape the strategy and the narratives for themselves and the communities, it becomes difficult to participate meaningfully in various matters. So retweeting a photo, for example, might be helpful, but not enough in the long run. And just adding on to that, my second part of the first question would be that what role as we as a feminist organization and individuals can play in taking responsibility of the way we use or interact with technology, so as to empower us rather than make us more vulnerable. So yeah, thank you so much, Kirti. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Just a quick check to see that I'm audible. If I could just have a thumbs up, that would be great. Thank you so much. No pressure following such amazing speakers. I'm just going to try to live up to that threshold, and I apologize in advance if I don't match up. But it's energizing to be here, and I would like everybody to just bear an example that has played out in front of you in mind. This is how we feminize spaces. This is how we own spaces. This is how we visibilize ourselves. And with that in mind, any approach that we take forwards in this context of this conversation, and then maybe in our own lives individually, should typically just be informed by our own positionality. So on that note, I want to talk a little bit about what technology is and has been, and how much of technology reflects what society is in contemporary times, and how much of what technology has created for us as a reflection of what society has been so far. So the first frontier of the technology space is the internet. And the internet, like every other offline public space, is woefully or fortunately equally public. In importing that public space, we have also followed somewhat of a template that we have existed in our offline lives. So the same systems and structures, be that patriarchy, racism, casteism, or religious differences, or any political differences that divide us over the years, have found its root and positions in technology and tech-related spaces. Now, this automatically means that we are going into a social order in a different arena with the same inequalities in place. Technology has the power to empower, but that power to empower will remain hidden as long as it remains couched in the systems and structural violence that have embraced and normalized certain forms of violence offline. Now, society has traditionally been patriarchal. Misogyny prevails more in terms of the norm rather than the exception. The dominance of the male identity to the discrimination or outright exclusion and violence toward other identities continues to pervade the internet as a public space as well. Now, given this, we see manifestations in all areas of technology. Think about artificial intelligence. It is gendered from the get-go. Credit scores in the banking sector have oftentimes excluded women or offered bizarre credit scores for non-binary people simply because it is taught to assume that the male is the dominant in borrowing a loan. Virtual assistant technology is gendered. I want you to just think about it for a minute. You have Siri, you have Cortana, you have Alexa, you have Google Assistant. Just think of their voices, all female or associated with the social construct of the female identity. From that, think about the dynamics that operate, which means that a woman, an entrepreneur, first generation entrepreneur in her family, a non-binary person seeking emancipation from a family that has misgendered them for years, is never going to be able to find a bank loan because artificial intelligence has decided that they are not creditworthy. Society will continue to order women because we're telling Alexa, Cortana, Siri, or Google Assistant to do our bidding. And very rarely do we find any of these devices normalizing a man's voice or even the act of a man taking orders from other people. With all of this in place, it becomes more clear than ever before that technology will continue to entrench what we have normalized offline. And we have the power as feminists to really put the brakes on this and change course long before it becomes all the more deeper and insidious. So to this end, I want to leave you with a few thoughts around feminist space making and digital space usage in the technology realm. The first thing I can immediately think of is in creating, crafting, using, or instrumentalizing technology, can we prioritize impact over intent? Now, a couple of months ago, the news came up about lockdowns in several countries lifting. And in the entire time that lockdowns existed, were entrenched as the normal dominant approach to the pandemic, stories and reports of domestic violence skyrocketed. And yet we still don't have a means to use technology, which became the frontier for work from home, to respond to survivors on an as much of a scale as violence took place. Which means that technology is still being a barrier in its access rather than in its operation as it's intended to be. There were reports from the news about a marathon which allowed people running the race to document their journey entirely on their own by presenting their geolocated spaces using the tech apparatus for it. But in the process, women who were mapping their movements were stalked, were harassed, with people showing up while they were running their race, people objectifying them for the clothing they wore and reducing them to women who should not even be there. If impact was prioritized over intent, we might have provided for eventualities that we may not see from our dominant perspective. What is our gaze when we're developing technology? What is our gaze when we're using technology? And what is our positionality in terms of presenting a piece of technology as a solution? Can we keep in mind those we want to reach in the final frontier of that piece of technology being a source of support, to define what that support can look like? Moving from impact over intent, a second key component is compassion in technology. Who is accessing this technology and who can access it in realistic ways? How far is access tied to our own assumptions around using the internet? And how far can that translate to reach the last mile in effective ways that are lasting and supportive to them? During the lockdowns here in India, there was a WhatsApp-based helpline that called for women who wanted to report domestic violence to use WhatsApp and report their cases. Inspired by that, a local police station developed its own WhatsApp helpline and asked women in the region to just leave an emoji so that the police could get into a violent situation and rescue women. Sadly, one area that went unnoticed in this entire endeavor was that the last mile in several parts of India continues to practice what's called a household phone, which is known as the husband's phone, and a separate phone for women, which is typically bereft of all the technological configurations that the average smartphone has. So women were forced to use phones and are still forced to use phones that are just capable of making or receiving phone calls. The SIM card on those phones is sometimes prevented from making outgoing calls and therefore is only capable of receiving calls and not doing anything else. So a woman who was facing an abusive situation literally had to rely on her husband's phone to send a WhatsApp message to the police. Now, instead of showing up on the doorstep, the police wound up replying to the message, which she had deleted and assumed would not be traceable to her. And this led to redoubling of violence. It's important to understand with compassion that the last mile using the tech apparatus we are creating for them is not necessarily going to be able to access it in the ways we envision. Whether that is you setting time aside to understand what your last mile's needs are, or you finding out ways to make tech accessible based on those needs. Taking that extra step is emulating a feminist value in a new frontier that is so desperately in need of it, compassion. The third thing I can immediately think of is nurturing enabling environments. Now, technology offers a powerful scale and a powerful shield of anonymity. You and I can see each other at this moment because we are presenting our wholesome identities using video cameras. But the same people could be very, very different in a social media setting where our names can be anonymized, our faces and our identities can be anonymized. And this is a scary prospect because everything from catfishing to blackmail to photo manipulation continues to thrive under this cloak of anonymity. What technology has done is to enable crime very blatantly and in a very simplistic and linear way of putting it. But as movement building takes root, as feminists gather, as peace activists gather, as people like you and I have these conversations, we are also working towards building enabling environments for solutions to take root, for more wholesome approaches to entrench feminism, for more wholesome approaches for women and non-binary people to not only find space, but to occupy that space, which is rightfully theirs. In nurturing movement building, one of the most important things to think about is how important it is to build safe and brave spaces. Nurturing space is not just about inclusion. It is about agency within the space of inclusion. Who is allowed to access a space must really shift to whose space is this and who is taking up that space. Because the allowing language is facilitating gatekeeping and enabling room for inbred violence as well. Moving towards building safe and brave spaces can only happen if we're willing to dismantle systemic violence, if we're only willing to dismantle the powers that be that so callously silence so many voices like yours and mine. Whether that is taking the extra mile to understand what blocking or reporting mechanisms look like on a platform, or taking a simple step on a daily basis to understand what the law says in your country and educating others around you so they feel empowered about the spaces they navigate. These steps can go a very long way in subverting systems. Most people live in fear simply because systems have never enabled their voices to both come out or find people to listen to it and act on it. You could be that agent. You could serve as that agent of change and establish a new norm within the technology space. No matter whether that is for a friend or for a stranger, starting small can go a very long way. Finally, intersectionality. Feminism on the internet space must be intersectional or nothing at all. The last mile I kept talking about is often understood only through the lens of intersectionality. Through the lockdowns here in India, as more and more schools went online to distance education, there were young women across the country that had to make a very difficult choice not to pursue education because their families had a single device or none at all. And priority for that device went to the man or the boy of the house. In all of this, a young woman, a Dalit, for those who are unaware, a person belonging to a lower caste background in India, had died by suicide because she could not access the devices that her school had mandated for her to access. And she faced so much of oppression when she articulated that she had a patent need that she could not fulfill. Intersectionality is fundamental to our understanding of the gendered experiences offline, and equally fundamental to our understanding of the gendered experiences in online spaces. We carry the same language, the same thought patterns, the same viewpoints when we enter the internet space. Our digital ages are not the same as our real age. Take, for example, a 15-year-old and a 45-year-old getting onto the internet for the first time. The 15-year-old is less likely to arrive on the internet with the same amount of conditioning as a 45-year-old. But the both of them are navigating the same space for the first time, meaning that their digital ages remaining the same do not mean that we treat them in the same way. The conditioning a person brings to the table, the conditioning a person prefers a conversation with, goes a long while in making a place safe or unsafe. I see that I am low on time, so I am going to wrap up what I want to say with a very, very thought-provoking idea for you to really mull over. Who are you in the offline space, and how much of who you are in the offline space is translating to the privileges you enjoy in the online space and keeping oppressions of others around you alive? And what can you do to dismantle it? Thank you so much for listening to me.
You're not audible, Aisha.
Hello.
You're showing as muted, Aisha.
Hello.
Yeah, can hear you now. But very faintly. Maybe you need to increase the volume.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is it like really low or?
Very low.
Okay, just a second. Hello. Am I audible enough? No. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. And thank you so much, Kirti. I think you raised some extremely important points for us to think about, like extremely important. Like I think that particular line that you said, I was going to stay with me that, going into a social order with the same inequalities. And I think that sort of goes for everything that, in terms of we are looking towards, progressive ideologies are moving it forward into the world, but like with the same inequalities that we still refuse to address and the gaps that are there. And also about impact and intent, what you said about, I think I was also thinking about this another example that there are certain apps that are used by parents to keep a track of their kids and where they are, but those apps are also being used by certain abusers and people to harass as well. So I think it's the flip side is there, and is always going to be there, and until and unless we address the offline, the patriarchy and the casteism and the racism that is there, all of these are going to always keep reflecting in the online world. Because like the Sahas app, for example, that you created to help survivors of domestic violence was, I mean, revolutionary and very helpful. But the same idea of the anonymity or networking could be used by someone with bad intentions as well. And just before we close this panel, I just have one last question for you. Like in terms of who do we, when our rights are violated, when we are being online and are sharing our opinions, or but our rights are violated by not just by trolls or individuals who don't agree with the opinion or who come with the same sort of patriarchal mindset that they practice in their real life, but also we are being censored by the government or by the platform which is choosing to share what their politics lies with and sort of putting forward those messages. So my last question to you would be that who do we sort of hold accountable, or who do we ask our questions to? Would it be the online platforms that, like you said, they only reflect, because the industry is also heavily male dominated, be it the social media platforms or there are women, but the number is still quite low. So do we hold them accountable in terms of their community guidelines and what a sham they are in terms of, like, for example, Instagram community guidelines is something that, even the options that they give to report a certain content that you see, which could be a clear violation of certain discriminating against a community or an identity, but they just refuse to take it down. But at the same time, something related, like what Nandini said, a woman's nipple is something that is immediately considered to be a big issue to people's vote. So yeah, who do we hold accountable? Would it be the platform? Would it be the governments that sort of has made the redressal mechanisms that we have, like that we have laws to combat internet violence, and they have created certain policies to help as well. Cyber cells exist. So do we reach out to them? But then the whole process of, for example, if a woman is being sent rape threats or death threats online, to what extent can she go and is it even worth for her to put in that effort? She already has her own life going on, struggling to sort of survive and make that, and then get into this particular legal battle as well. or do we ourselves also take the responsibility of being aware of our rights and our when we are going online, what is it that we are sharing, who can it be accessible to, and could it, like even when we are writing something, just thinking about if it could be violating someone else's or hurting someone's sentiments. So just that if you could share a bit on.
Thank you for your question there, Aisha. I don't have a perfect answer by way of a solution to this, so I'm going to attempt to think through this aloud. And I really invite all of you to also feel free to think through this aloud in your comments or in your responses to this. First of all, systems and structures are so deeply entrenched, whether that is the government or a platform or a company that is creating these resources or these spaces in the online arena. So it is going to reflect a significant amount of surveillance, a significant amount of silencing, and a significant amount of erasure, because power continues to keep itself alive doing these very things. Holding power accountable is not easy. It's not. It's oftentimes in the hands of the person who has faced the greatest amount of oppression at the hands of that very powerful system. It's a lonely process. It's emotional labor. It is an exceptionally unnecessary burden anybody has to carry. And yet, as women who have navigated the spaces being catcalled, being abused, being constantly targeted within and outside our homes and in the workplace, we are investing this emotional labor. I see you. I see every one of you that's nodding. I see every one of you that's replying with a yes. I see you. I hear you. The system is not perfect. It failed us even before we were born and will fail several generations after us even before they are born. What we can do together, number one, is to continue to raise our voice and hold systems, structures, and power structures accountable. We can gather together because there is so much strength in numbers. History has shown you countless number of times the anti-race movement, the anti-caste movement, the feminist movement, that mobilization and amplifying our voices together has gone a significant way. The one difference that we can exercise at this point is strategic essentialism instead of essentialism. We're not going to navigate these spaces as women in a homogeneous block, but as a diverse set of women, a diverse set of non-binary people who have a similar agenda dovetailing in making sure that our voices are heard. The best way to go forward really is to not overcome what we call differences, but to celebrate our differences. The weakness of our movement has been that we have often pointed fingers at one another. We have gatekept, we have occupied spaces even within our limited space, and we have competed for very limited resources. If we could maybe dismantle that, because that divide and rule has kept the colonialism of the final frontier alive. If we can dismantle our own infighting, raise our voices collectively together, speak truth to power, we might dent the system. Someday a conversation like this might be happening, I don't know, maybe in a hologram if technology is that far, and they might be thinking of what all of us did in these moments to make that possible. Maybe let's make that real.
I think that was like the perfect note to sort of end the panel on, make that dent and keep having these conversations and these discussions. Thank you so much, Kirti. It has been great to have you on the panel and to learn about the great work that you're doing. I think we should keep in touch and definitely explore more ways in which we can, make that dent that you talked about. So thank you so much. And I will now pass on to Natasha, who will be taking up any questions. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Kirti, for that really thought-provoking conversation. And I think there's a lot of food for thought for all of us working in the rights space. And now we're at the question and answer part of our program. And thank you to the audience for sharing your questions. And we will try our best to answer as many as we can during this time. If not, we will also be putting highlights of this dialogue and the recording on our website. So more information will be available there. So one of the questions we have from the audience is to share, they would like the panelists to share any digital case management that your organizations operate for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. I believe Noval and Pushpa would like to respond. Noval, we'll go to you first.
Okay, thank you, Natasha, and this is a very good question that I want to address actually. So, Jariwayanan, we are not we are actually do not receive the report ourselves and directly, I mean, and we don't think about ourselves as service providers, but as a bridge to service providers. And we understand that if they need to report through us first, for example, then they need to reshare their painful experience multiple times, right? Because they need to share their experience through us, and then they need to share the experience through the service providers, and then the police if they need to report the case to the police as well. And it's just so unnecessary, I think, and we don't want that. We don't want to give them any more burden. We want to make it easier for the victim to report their cases and to get help. And second, we want to avoid safety and security risks because there is just a lot of risk to have those stories and reports in our system, especially in social media, right? And we need to work very hard to ensure that there is no leak, etc. So we decided to give them the access to the service providers, to 100 service providers directly through their hotline and their digital hotline through WhatsApp, for example. And then afterwards, we work and support the service providers to handle the case and to make sure the victim receives their rights. So that's it.
Thank you, Noval. And I believe Pushpa would also like to respond to this question. So go ahead, Pushpa.
Yeah, sure. So we are very glad that we have created a safe space through our social media for the young people and women to share everything about them. So we also receive messages from women, especially women, about their domestic violence experiences, and they seek help through our social media chat places. So since we are not equipped with professional human resources to address such questions or such queries, we refer them to the professional places. For example, we give them with hotline or helpline numbers of government or organizations that provide solutions for the sexual and gender-based violences, and which and places where they provide psychological counseling for the people who have suffered from such cases of violence. So far we have been connecting the victims and the organizations that have been providing help through online spaces. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Thank you, Pushpa, and thank you, Noval, for sharing the work that you're doing around supporting survivors of violence through your digital spaces. The next question is for Amalia. What has been your experience in reporting trolling and censorship? Please go ahead, Amalia.
Thank you, Natasha. So at that time, Women on Web contacted the government or platform and asking them about the reason behind the censorship. Their answer is really important to be documented for our advocacy in the future. We also inform them how our website or posts provide the information, and it is everyone's right to have that access to information. So we emphasize that by censoring our website or posts, it means they are violating the basic rights. Most likely, they didn't respond to that, but they opened the access afterwards. Back to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Amalia, for responding to that question and sharing how easy or difficult it has been to educate or lobby for access to this kind of information online and not be trolled or censored for the work that you do. And those are the questions we have. Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing your experiences and your responses. And now I have the brilliant opportunity to introduce Dr. Suchitra Dalvi, the coordinator of the Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, and give her the floor for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. It's really my privilege to make the closing remarks at the end of this brilliant webinar, very cutting edge and very thought-provoking. So I would like to first start by thanking everyone who has been with us as participants, all those who have joined in as panelists and speakers, as well as the organizing team. A very special thanks to the Bahasa language and the sign language interpreters, which has allowed us to create a more inclusive space and reach out to many more people. So in closing, I had a few remarks and I would just like to share a PowerPoint presentation because there were some images that I thought would really help consolidate what I wanted to say at the end. Just give me a second. So, we have had such in-depth and nuanced conversations today, from the big picture overview to the ground realities of what technology means and what it has the potential to do, both good and bad. We have discussed today the digital spaces and taboos, as well as the boundaries and edges and the jigsaw puzzles at the intersections of both. However, as SRHR advocates, activists, and implementers, I want to leave us with a sort of a big picture overview of the larger tech landscape beyond just the digital landscape, within which the issues we care about and the concepts we work with are likely to undergo tectonic shifts that may render our current frameworks even unrecognizable. Tomorrow is already here. And if we want to lead the conversation around the issues we care about deeply, I think we have a responsibility to understand the shifting and blurring of issues that are core to our work. So I want to start off with acknowledging Ada Lovelace, who was the one who invented the algorithms which actually allowed modern computing processes. And to reference back to what Kirti said, the way the artificial intelligence voices actually silence the knowledge that it was a woman who started all this and are using it in a very sexist and even sometimes misogynistic way. And I want to also lead us to recognizing that the concept of singularity, which has been allowed by the artificial intelligence creation, where some people believe that the next stage of evolution of the human race will actually be the merging of human consciousness with robot existence. So it's quite an exciting landscape that we are looking at. However, the question of personhood, which is something that for all of us in the SRHR work, is a very important conversation to have, whether philosophically or realistically. But that question really becomes a line in the sand when a chatbot can develop its own language spontaneously. However, real people can be prevented from having a voice. So this is the kind of environment, where we are straddling kind of both worlds. And a conference, and it's shocking to see it's actually already the 6th International Congress being held on love and sex with robots. And what I found interesting is that one of their topics is on feminist and intersectional approaches. So I'm, urging that we need to be leading these conversations and not only reacting to the way technology is going to drive this conversation forward. Look at some of these topics that they are talking about, and I wonder how many of us have had a chance to interact or reflect on the kind of conversations that are happening in the field of technology. As we survey the futuristic landscape, we can see that sex dolls, sex robots are becoming a billion-dollar industry, while sex work itself being done by real people is not still recognized as a livelihood and criminalized across most countries in the world. So as we survey this futuristic landscape, which is going to be populated by things like the artificial womb, this lamb, for example, was grown in the artificial womb right from the point of conception. We already have cloning in animals, and we can be quite certain that it's soon going to reach the human race. We could be looking at a world which will simultaneously and paradoxically free live women from some of the stereotypical gender roles dictated by their bodies, but also populate the world with highly stylized and sexualized robots, which will reinforce those stereotypes. Sex robots do have a great potential for good, but at present is geared only towards men. And it makes me wonder, how will intimacy and relationships or expression of our sexuality hold up to something that can be written into an algorithm owned and controlled by someone else? Even more disturbingly, how will the boundaries of consent be understood in the future? Who is a person, who has a voice, and who decides? We need to be at the leading edge of these dialogues if we want to provide thought leadership and to influence the way tech and taboos intersect. We are working at the edges of a whole new world, and we need to be ready. We hope to have a series of such conversations over the new year and hope that you will join us. But even as we live increasingly in a digital landscape, we need to remember that social media and online spaces are just that. It is a medium and a space. The real power still lies with the person behind the algorithm and in front of the screen. And it is still all about the people. Which is why this image, despite being a grainy image from 1989, way before any social media, is still a very powerful one because it shows us the power of a single person. This is why we need to remember that even if the social media platforms facilitate and catalyze sweeping changes, the real power will still lie in the hands of the people, whether it is in street action, whether it is in social media action or groundwork. So I want us to appreciate the fact that we are already riding the waves of a revolution, but the revolution will not be tweeted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Suchitra. And I believe that is the end of our dialogue today. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for having such a great conversations. And thank you to our support, Regina, Adrian, and Arif for helping us make this conversation more accessible. And thank you to the support team behind the scenes working. Thank you, everyone, and we wish you a good day.
Thank you so much, everyone. I learned a lot today.